Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. Delighted to say I'm here with Henry Shukman. He is a Zen teacher and I guess I should say an ex-writer and a very good one at that. I've read his memoir, a Zen memoir, One Blade of Grass. Henry, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's lovely to be with you.
So you're in Santa Fe right now?
Well, I normally live there these days and have for many years, but right now, actually, I just happen to be in California.
Ah, okay.
Just as it happens. Yeah.
Yes, and you're a fellow Brit, Englishman, indeed.
Yes.
and now, yes, as a Zen teacher, I feel like I want to just because we've got this incredible backstory. It's like you've had 4 or 5 different lives. But just to bring people into your world right now, can you give us a day in the life of a Zen teacher today? Your what's important to you? How your life goes right now.
Well, that's I'd love to. I've got to just put on the little rider that what it's been the last sort of 18 months or even coming on 2 years is different from what it was before because of COVID. So I'm doing the basics are still like, get up, maybe make a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and get on the cushion. The sort of first item of the day really, is, well, maybe the coffee sometimes, maybe the tea sometimes, and getting on the cushion. And I just sit, start the day basically with stillness, and ideally, usually, commonly, it's kind of as the night is handing over to day. So it's a beautiful way to start the day when the world is still in transition, and we just get into this restful condition that's very aware that meditation, over time can help us find more and more easily. So that's item number 1 in the day, and it's critical, and it's rarely less than an hour of sitting, and then, well, actually there's some variability, and the biggest variable is like how much I meet with people. I used to meet with people quite a lot, it's part of Zen teaching is one-on-one interactions with students. But actually, with COVID, obviously it became harder to do that in person. We shifted very easily to doing it online, which I'd been doing all along anyway with students in other parts of the world. But actually, and of course that ramped up, but then I had just a personal sort of thing, which was a bike accident that meant I could not do so much screen time. My neurology was a little bit rattled by this accident. And it's been a long, slow process actually of recovering. I'm fairly normal, basically functional in most ordinary sort of ways. It's just that if I spend a lot of time on a screen, I start to get neurological issues. And so, for example, right now, actually, I can't stare at the screen as we're talking. I've got a separate camera set up. So I can sort of glance down at the screen now and then, but also just look at the camera. And, it probably feels like I'm looking at you, but
it does. It feels very good.
I hope it does, but actually I'm not. I mean, I have done, I've been glancing at you as well, but I'm trying to mostly look at the camera. So in the light of that, it means I've done less of the Zen meetings in my daily routine these days. Instead, I've been, I've been busy. I've got a new meditation program that I've been sort of sharing with whoever wants to do it, which is called Original Love. And it's taken a lot of development to put the pieces of that in place. And it's running now. And it's been really quite exciting to see how much it's helped people and how many people are doing it. It's all online. And so I'm sort of busy with that. I've also, I'm writing more, actually.
No.
You're quite right. You're quite right to have called me an ex-writer. part of that book that you referenced is a story of how I sort of stopped being a writer. And I know there was a ridiculous paradox in writing a book about no longer being a writer. I knew it was an absurdity, but I sort of did it anyway. But actually, because that book somehow was, I don't know, I had really stopped writing, and it become no longer a central concern of my life for quite a number of years. And then that book happened, and now I'm sort of back. I'm back in the writing world a bit. I've just written another book. It's in a early draft stage, and so I'm working on that. Sometimes I've also found that I'm writing poems again, which is a thing I used to do, and I'm doing it with a deep new joy. Actually, it's really nice to be, and I think it's also really part of the COVID situation, that wanting to communicate and share in other ways seems to just somehow naturally come back up again, to be doing more of that. So then I sit again later, and I do all the usual household things we need to do, So nothing special, definitely nothing special in the life of a Zenny,
Zenny. And that's something that struck me about the book. I mean, I sort of vaguely familiar with I read the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I was a kid. I kind of understood the concepts a little bit, but that's what comes through in your memoir, is just how simple and straightforward Zen is. I mean, it's almost like maddeningly basic, right? Because there's part of me that feels drawn to, I don't know, mystical wonderment somehow, and sort of florid language, and I love Rumi, and but here when you talk about Zen, it's all that stripped out, right? It's almost like a deep appreciation of I don't know, the basics of life or something. I don't know how to articulate it, but it's
that's pretty good, actually. Deep appreciation of the basics of life. The old Zen adage is that, other people can walk on water and teleport and whatever these other miraculous powers are. But the Zenny says, my miracles, this is actually an old Chinese Zen practitioner called Layman Pang, he was known as. He said, my miracles are chopping wood and carrying water, which were like the two most basic household activities, having a fire and water, chopping wood, carrying water. Those are my real miracles. So finding the miraculous and the wonder in this very moment, always. That's the project of Zen, is that it's not denying that, this life is a most extraordinary thing. To be alive is the greatest, alive and aware, is the greatest sort of miracle of all, really, in a certain sense. But it doesn't need special things in order to be miraculous. It already is. And how to wend our way back to that kind of appreciation of the most simple, Yeah, it's. So I kind of would want to just push back a little bit on, like, is it really just sort of basic and ordinary and simple? Kind of yes, but also kind of no, because it's a journey of discovery. I mean, the arc of a Zen training is to take us to, the boundless, the infinite, the totally empty, the nothing at all, the totally unified, the whole oneness of the universe, is to take us to all of that, but then really kind of bring us back to just a cup of tea now, and a conversation.
Yeah. And am I right? You're still an atheist. Are you still an atheist? You describe yourself as an atheist in the book.
I mean, I wish somehow I could say no, but yeah, I mean, I just don't. I don't know. It's just not in my makeup to I somehow can't understand the idea that there's some other great being. I mean, I feel that there's, let alone one that can be quite harsh and aggressive and encourage. I mean, I mean, being somewhat, I see a lot of negatives in organized religion and in theistic belief. I think I'm sure I'm one-sided about it. I see how destructive it's been in human history, and I see how, particularly, Western religion has been such a sort of inspirer, I think, of this sense of having an exclusive, special, exceptionalist claim on reality, on truth, that was one of the various elements behind Western imperial colonialism, as I see it. It was the whole project of stomping around the world and brutally oppressing people and stealing and exploiting, and it had one piece in that puzzle was having a religion that insisted it was the one and only real one. And of course, most religions do that, but this one, became particularly good at sort of spreading, in a viral kind of way. I don't know. I'm very negative about it. I'm sorry. I know there's another.
No, and I can understand the critique on religion, but what's still interesting to me is, even outside of religion, the experiences that you've shared so vividly in the book, you accepted in a way that didn't have you come to a belief that there was, something beyond, right? That this was an experience that you had, and it kind of, I guess, in a very Zen way, and that was that. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I think that what's great about the great religions, all of them, is that they have, in fact, sort of embedded within them. They have, I think, great discoveries about human nature and human consciousness, and that there's aspects to our being that are simply boundless and infinite, and there's a, when I say our being, I mean, of course, our consciousness, like our very consciousness right now, just as we're sitting chatting, there's the focus on this conversation and on, our communicating, and it's very nice to connect with you, actually, Richard. Thank you for opening this up. But at the same time, this consciousness goes infinitely wide. There's no limit to how wide it goes. And I believe that one service that religion has done over the many decades, millennia, is to sort of preserve some avenue to awareness of that, of the great, in the face of the sort of infiniteness, really, of our experience here and now, that has that dimension of infinity, or even dimensionlessness, also, but don't want to get too complicated here, but it has that, and I think the great side of religion is whenever it acknowledges that great mystery, the mystery, really, of being. I mean, I think that's a wonderful side to religions as well, and I just wish that the more political dimensions of religion were more curbed, and and people were just, and religions, I think there's a strong movement, actually, probably these days, in interfaith and so on, religions learning to be more respectful to one another and more pluralist. It seems to me like there's an immaturity about exceptionalism, about claiming that we're the only one. It's all very, it's one thing to say, I really like ours, I think our religion is great, but not to then take the step of saying, so all the others must be wrong. I think that's immature. And right. I think some religions haven't been called on that, or haven't called themselves enough on that, and it's sad to me, actually, because I think it's unwise, really, and they should know better, and their leaders should know better and should be. What am I saying? I'm being really bossy now, but I think that it's possible to make sort of some of the deepest discoveries that religions can convey without any religion at all. I believe that. And that's been my experience, actually. And so why don't we go that way? And, in other words, if religion has these hazardous add-ons that travel with it, like, we're the best, we're the only ones, why not, why not jettison it and just really be more and more discovering what it is to be human? That's mystery and wonder enough, I feel.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting then to ponder as you speak. Why do you think people crave something that isn't that simple? Why do we seek religion that might give us more guidelines and content, if you like?
Yeah, nice question. I mean, well, here's a couple of possible responses, I suppose. One is that, the first and foremost is that we suffer a lot. Life is going to have grievous losses, almost inevitably for almost all of us, I think. And it can be very, very painful. And we want somewhere to sort of go with that pain and that suffering that inevitably will come. And it's a beautiful thing that we have systems that can somehow embrace us and hold us with our suffering. I think that's one side of it. But the other side of it is that I think we may, all of us at times at least, have intimations that we're not seeing the whole picture, that our harried lives of, what Wordsworth called our sort of lives of getting and spending. What does he say? The world is too much with us. How does it go? Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. That we're so busy trying to get what we want or we feel we must need, and, trying to keep away the things we don't want to have happen. We're so busy with that. Isn't there more? Maybe we commonly have some sort of intimation of, or many of us do at times have some sense that there's a bigger picture, and we long for a broader perspective, a wider view, where, we feel more settled in ourselves, in our life, where we're able to see at times that, although there's challenges and frustrations and disappointments in this life, there's also somehow great beauty in the midst of it as well. And I would say that both those things can be found, both the sense of a kind of deeper perspective that supports us and a wider view that opens us up to the beauty of being alive. Both of those can be found without religion, I think, is my experience. I guess through a sort of, it's true, I've been through a rather kind of long, sort of, in a sense, possibly arduous kind of training, which I apparently needed, but I don't know that all of us need that. But at least I can say, I'm pretty sure, this can be found without religion. And I like the name of your podcast, where it says it's right. It's about being human. Yeah. I think this sort of training I'm talking about is really about deeper look at being human.
Yeah. And you describe it as an arduous training. Well, it's interesting to consider. Can there be a non-arduous training regime which gets us there? Or does it somehow, does it cut against the grain of what it generally means to be human to such an extent that there's always going to be a level of ardor to get to this, more awakened position, or whatever we might want to call it?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't claim that last point, but for myself, but anyways, there's some things have shaken loose through it in what seems to be mostly positive kinds of ways. I think it's a good question. It's in the sutras of Buddhism, of early Buddhism texts that purport to record how the Buddha taught and various different ways he used to do it, but he sometimes talked about what the shift that he had been through, by which he became the Buddha, awakened or enlightened, that's what that means, the word Buddha. That shift, he said, initially he was encouraged to start helping others find it. And he said, no, it's too difficult. It's like going against the stream. Like this, I'll have to be teaching people to sort of go against themselves. They're so habituated to acting, thinking, in certain ways, behaving in certain ways. This is like going against the stream. And I think there's truth to that we've got, what in Buddhism we call conditioning, which we might just call habits of thought, habits of feeling, habits of behavior, habits of speaking, habits of, how we formulate and understand our life, our world, it can take quite a lot of highly repetitive sort of training really to shake some of those things loose. I think probably there might be some formula whereby, if it isn't somewhat long and arduous, maybe it's not going to be that thorough. I don't really know whether that need be stated as a formula, but it could be that at least for some, I was slow and hard to really, I was sort of stubborn, set in my ways, I feel. And it took quite a lot of hammer blows to break some of the shells of around my, understanding. I don't know. That's a and that's certainly the impression I got, from the book. But something that comes to mind as we speak is there's a brilliant book. I don't know if you've heard of it, called the Continuum Concept by a woman called Judith Laidlaw. I read it way back. It's just a Brazilian childcare was one of the things. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. And her observations of, very sort of high levels of attachment parenting, highly, loving and secure childhoods of some native tribal families that she was observing. And her observation was that the adults in those societies, these very loving and caring societies, it seemed to her, and this was my read of the book, found, let's say, spirituality a little more easily. It was easier for them to connect to these altered states of awareness, this higher sense of being. Again, this is my interpretation. And that rung true for me because, I haven't been through the same training as you, but a lot of my work has been in trauma release work and so on to get to a more stable, let's say, condition. And I've related to that as being arduous. And I do wonder if for me and for others, if there was less trauma in childhood, it would be somewhat easier to find these places.
Yeah, that resonates with me too. I mean, I think it's quite complex on the relationship between trauma and spirituality. It's a great subject, actually. I'm glad you bring it up. I mean, here's one thought is like, yes, I somehow think that, lovingness or some feeling of love or belovedness is central to spiritual experience, to let's say, I call them sort of wider, broader experience, experiencing boundlessness, the freedom of boundlessness, where we actually feel that we're intimate with everything. We feel even more that we're just part of the one single fabric. And that's an immensely sort of loving thing to experience. We feel like we're so part of everything that we're just totally loved. It's the sort of flip side of the isolation that's part of trauma, I think. That it's an ultimate belonging because we're part of everything. And I wonder, I had a traumatic childhood too. I starting from when I was 6 months old, and I was weaned by my mother leaving me for 10 days and just handing me over to a au pair girl who gave me formula. And when my mother came back, I was totally covered in very severe eczema. And, I can only imagine what I went through in those days. I have some sense from some trauma work I've done myself, somatic work, and of the agonies of that, and right through my childhood, this severe eczema didn't really let up. I was often in hospital, and it was a very, 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 very chronic thing through my childhood. But then when I was 19, I was away from home on a gap year, working abroad, and I had what I didn't know what it was, but I came to understand later it was a sort of a spiritual experience, an awakening experience, and discovered this utterly uncompromised belongingness in the whole of everything is what it felt like. And by then, actually, while I'd been away, my eczema had totally improved and healed. It was kind of miraculous for me, And then this awakening experience happened, completely sober, by the way, no additives in it. And it was, and I wondered, like, well, was there some, I don't know, some sort of impulsion towards something like that, to coming out of the trauma of my childhood? Was there something in me that was so hungry for some sense of belonging and of being held? Because actually being held could be painful for me as a kid because of the state of my skin, so, I don't know, but you see what I mean? Like, is it simply that, well, if we've had a lot of trauma, it's harder to find this stuff? Well, probably yes, on the whole, because the avenue to sort of love somehow is more complicated. It's got obstacles in it, but at the same time, I think there can be a hunger for it, a yearning that's very sort of pure and can be powerful. And maybe we sometimes, in some cases, we're more driven in a sort of spiritual quest as well. I'm struck by how, and some people talk about this, how, a spiritual experience, quote unquote, an awakening experience, can be a kind of counterpart to a traumatic experience, in that it's an experience of overwhelming benevolence, overwhelming belovedness, or overwhelming union of some kind, that can leave its own sort of, what would you call it, post-benevolence, not disorder, not stress, love order. condition, a sort of post-awakening love condition. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then as you speak, of course, so a term that's often used is spiritual bypass, right? That for some of us, we find some solace in those experiences and we continue to seek them. But somehow use that as a way to avoid doing any emotional work or what we might call trauma work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing to bring up at this point. I mean, when John Wellwood, who first used that term, when he first used it back in the 80s, I think, he meant a phenomenon he was seeing in his friends who were serious about their spiritual practice, which mostly in those days, it was mostly about meditation. You know, first, second generation of serious meditators in the West. He said that, you know, he could observe that there was a phenomenon whereby they would have some, you know, life problem, and rather than address it, they would focus on their meditation, hoping that somehow that would resolve the life problem. You know, let's say they, you know, not getting on well with their spouse, so I'll sit more, and then maybe that will help me get into a state of mind whereby I can communicate better with my spouse or something, rather than just doing some couples therapy. You know, so his initial use of the word was really more like, rather like workaholism or something like that. It was sort of, you know, spiritualism. You know, it's like overdoing spiritual practice rather than actually tending to something in life that needs tending to. Now these days it's morphed a bit so that people use the term to mean like, well, you got your emotional stuff and you're not looking at it. You're doing your spirituality too much and you're blissing out. But it's complex. Let me tell you why I think it's complex. Because first of all, the kind of experience that I was just talking about, awakening experiences, they're rare. You know, they're rare, and they change the course of our life. They shift our priorities in a beautiful way, which might well make somebody realize, you know, wow, I've got these lingering chronic difficulties. I better do some work on that level. An awakening experience can and commonly would actually lead somebody into doing some trauma work or some therapy. On the other hand, there's a kind of non-awakening, meditative experiences we can get into while meditating, of sort of samadhi, we call it, you know, which is absorption states, which are temporary. They, you know, we can turn, with practice and with some, you know, skill and guidance, we can learn ways of getting into quite deep, fulfilling states of absorption. They're sort of flow states, really, while meditating. And that's really good and positive, but not if we're doing that. I mean, we shouldn't do that. It's not wise to do that and think that we don't have to tend other stuff in life. You know, it's like, so I think it's not quite such a simple thing as like, oh, that person's doing too much spiritual stuff. They're neglecting other things. That may be true, but we got to be a little careful about it. There's subtleties in there. Like, there's nothing wrong with an awakening experience. You know, no way. And no way is that spiritual bypassing. Not at all. That's a grace, a gift, a wonder that befalls somebody out of the blue. And it's totally to be treasured and cherished and kind of worked with. You know, it's not an end point by any means. And usually it would tend to make somebody more conscious of other kinds of psychological work they might need to do. On the other hand, you know, just thinking life problems will go away, but if I sit enough, That's more like spiritual bypassing.
Yeah, got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes an awful lot of sense. And I think what I'm just pondering here is because I don't think I've ever had that kind of experience where I just, experience some, I don't know, some overwhelming sense of love and belonging or whatever that might look like. It's hard for me to appreciate just what a difference that might make or could have made to my own, emotional and trauma release work. But as you describe it, that makes complete sense. I meditate. I do transcendental meditation, which I know you moved away from. I'm still there, and I find that really powerful in terms of sort of regulating my system and helping me to relax more and sleep better. And sometimes I can be aware of some kind of an altered state where I feel higher levels of joy and bliss, but nothing that that approaches what you described on the beach in the book, or on Gog Hills right now outside Cambridge. And then I get there's sort of several events in your life that seem to have a particular quality that, I guess I haven't experienced. I guess most people don't experience in their lifetimes, right?
I just don't know. I've read a little bit of research on it. There's one guy called David Yadin. I think he may be at Berkeley. I can't remember now, but he's been researching that. He has what he calls what do they call it? STEs, SelfTranscendent Experiences. He has a fairly wide range of experiences that he includes in that category, which would include like flow states, when somebody's playing a violin or riding a mountain bike or surfing or, making love or in some deeply engaging activity, and gets suddenly in the zone. You know what I mean? That shift where the basketball player just, everything's so easy and clear. And actually they're doing something incredibly complex, but it seems easy. And it's like they can't go wrong. And sure enough, it's a slam dunk. And, that being in the zone, there's a lot of research on that, pioneered by you probably know of him, Csikszentmihalyi in the 70s and 80s in Chicago on flow states. And so David Yadin includes them as self-transcendent experiences. He also includes, when we're doing mindfulness practice and we just become really observant of what's going on without feeling engaged in it. So we suddenly hit this level of peaceful, calm observing of whatever's arising. He includes that, the mindful witness. So those are things that, they wouldn't, I hate to sort of put it like this, but somehow in terms of awakening, they're not that, but they're very, very nice, very positive. So he thinks that including those, he reckoned that in some samples, sort of 30% of people have had taste of that. So, but who knows, But the point is that we all have the capacity for it, and I want to say again, just coming back to trauma, I feel that it's a bit hard for me to formulate this clearly, but I want to say something like, I believe in our suffering. I believe in our pain and our hurt and even our trauma. I believe in it. I sort of believe that it's in some way it's the real part that let me see if I can just unpack that a little bit better. Like I noticed that times in my life when I've really been able to trust my pain, my emotional pain, somehow it's better. It's better than times when I don't. That by sort of not going away from trauma, but opening to it, giving it space, letting it sort of guide me, really, and take me through whatever it needs. It somehow is, it leads to deeper, wiser, broader sense of things. I'm talking so vaguely. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with that. And I've heard people say before, like, if you're doing emotional work, you're really doing spiritual work. Because whenever you achieve some kind of breakthrough at the emotional level, you're simultaneously experiencing a breakthrough at the spiritual level, the psychological level, the physical level, right? That's one way of kind of thinking about it, is that we're operating on all of these planes simultaneously. And whenever we achieve some meaningful event on one level, it's happening at all levels, which would correlate with what you were saying about you have one of these spiritual experiences of love and belonging that's going to filter through on the other levels. Yes. I sort of half agree. I mean, I think there are different levels of work. I do think there are. And I don't think that every time I had some sort of breakthrough in therapy, it was equivalent to discovering my unity with the cosmos. No, that's not. You're not going to go that far.
What's that?
I said you're not going to go that far.
No. I think there are different levels. I really do, and I think it's good to keep awareness of that and keep some sort of because otherwise we'll end up losing awakening as when you can't lose it, but I mean, like, losing paths to it it needs to be upheld as well. This is a totally amazing thing a human being can go through, is to discover that their very own nature. And I think this is the point that I really want to make, is that our own heart, our own mind, our most sort of innermost sense of who we are, that, if investigated, can open out. Well, it already does open out, but we don't see it commonly. It opens out to the whole universe. And and when we find that, we also find that there's this utter wonder of everything being empty. That we're here we are, two guys talking, and I'm sitting here in this room, you're sitting in your room, and computer technology, Zoom, everything, internet, we're chatting. But at the same time, there actually is sort of a level of this moment right now that's completely empty. It's just utter silence, and yet it's manifesting, it's producing, it's generating, it's being exactly what we're doing right now. And to find that utter emptiness, that's not the precinct of psychology. It just isn't. It doesn't need to be. It's these old deep traditions like Zen and Buddhism that have been exploring that for millennia. And how does it relate to being a human being, wisely, kindly, happily in this world, just as this world is today? So I think, that's my little plug for acknowledging different levels of practice,
Yeah. No, I can see that. And that we need to honor them and keep them distinct because of and I suppose especially because of those distinct qualities of the spiritual experiences you're describing. Yeah. That it doesn't make sense to compare or equivocate. Right. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And, there's again, it comes back to this pluralist thing that I think is so healthy. It's pluralist. sometimes I hear psychologists wanting to claim, that we're doing the deepest possible spiritual work. I think we should be careful of claims like that is there some part of us that doesn't want to accept that we've got an emphasis here and it's a good one, and other methods have other emphases and they're good too? Is there some part of us that feels a need to say, we've got it all right here? And that's something to be watchful of in any system of psychology or spirituality.
Yeah. I resonate with that, and it's not just religion that does that. Because when I think about the different modalities, healing modalities that I've experienced in my life, they all there's a sort of tendency to claim exclusivity, right? It's like through this, all will be well, like in all domains.
Exactly. Yes, that's my point. I got deep into some dream work that was really, really helpful. I loved it. But they were always, they couldn't really bear the idea that Zen was doing something else. They wanted all that Zen awakening too in their system, and they didn't have it, but they sort of, it was very hard for them to accept that they weren't sort of total.
Yeah.
I think you're saying this, we're making the same point. I think.
Yeah.
Which is sad because they had something incredibly valuable to offer, and it's enough.
Yeah. But when I think about it, I think they're catering in a sense to a need in me it's almost like I just want to indulge that delusion that I found the thing. And if I just keep doing this thing, then everything gets better in all dimensions. And so there's there's a relationship there, right? With me as the customer and them as the purveyor.
Well, there's this thing that they talk about, some psychologists talk about projective identification, where we project onto either a teacher or a system or a group all the sort of positive stuff, and then we identify with it. So we become very invested in it being supremely good.
Yeah.
And that it goes with a phenomenon we call splitting, where, we project all the good onto this system that we're part of, let's say, with this teacher or founder or whatever. And then we split off. All the rest is not so good. This is the good one. Then we identify with the good one and split, reject all the rest of them. They're not as good, So that's a human tendency that we can watch for in ourselves, I mean, the answer is an answer. I think it somehow seems to come back to pluralism, that it's so nice to be openly acknowledging many paths, and all of them are to be honored. That doesn't mean that right now I'm really focusing on this one, but I don't need to be saying it's the one and only.
Right.
If I find I want to say that, then let's see what that's about.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested. And do you ever find yourself falling into that with your Zen practice? Do you ever feel that temptation?
I totally have done. These days, I mean, the fact that I can see how much I used to do that at different times, I hope means I tend to be doing it less today. I look out for it, and I really want to, I know the sort of my happy position that I can taste is this humble appreciation for it, or I'm humbly grateful for it, and have no need to make any claims of exclusivity.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Like there's a way.
Yeah, well, it links to the being humble, right? Because one cannot be humble and simultaneously be claiming the superiority of this particular system of behavior or thought or whatever it might be, spiritual practice. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's tricky because some parts of some spiritual systems are to be humble before our particular God.
Right.
And, that's a great kind of humility. But if we think, well, it can become a kind of fig leaf for exceptionalism.
Yeah.
I'm so abjectly humble before our God. And these other idiots, they're arrogant, because they don't get how humble they need to be before this God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's tricky. It's
yeah. Oh man, I know that you've got a time, a time constraint, but God, I could speak to you for hours. But I want to honor your, your the time you got available. So, we'll have to unfortunately bring this to a close. But what a wonderful kind of blast of insight and wisdom, from given your life and your experience with Zen. And I beseech people with even a shred of interest in Zen to go buy this book, One Blade of Grass. It really, it's just a great book. It's so well written. It's a piece of literature. It won a Times Literary Supplement Book of the Year. You are really, really talented writer. Wonderful book. And packed with stories. So, check the book out.
Thank you so much for saying that. And thank you for having me on. It's been really nice. I always feel just sort of more comfortable when somehow trauma is on the menu in a conversation. I don't know if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, exactly what you mean. Yeah, let's make trauma more comfortable as a couple. It's part of the mission of this podcast. Actually, is to take the stigma out of it and have have trauma be a kitchen table conversation. That's part of my mission for the world.
And it's great that you brought out the continuum concept, because there's an example, or there's a plea for child rearing that might, significantly reduce childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I absolutely. And what's interesting is that me continuing to do my emotional work and work on the way in which my kids trigger in me, it has been an access to me being a better father. And the less I'm triggered, the more choices I have in how I behave around my kids. But also just getting into the meditation practice has also massively helped, right? I think, I notice that if I'm dealing with my kids, after a good meditation, I'm in a completely different space. So I think child rearing is so important, and I think both spiritual practice and emotional work make such a difference in our parenting.
I totally agree. That you're just describing for me that mindful witness that's in a place of balance, clarity, and can choose responses.
Yeah. It's very important. And I can imagine if we had a world of Zen mothers and fathers, it'd be a different world.
Well, or trauma-aware mothers and fathers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And trauma-aware mothers and fathers. And trauma-aware, and of course, and those actively working on it, right? There's that's really what you're talking about in the Zen world. It's walking the path, and that's another. That's something I got from the book as well. It's doing the work to have the experiences that gets emphasized again and again in the book. Zen is about doing the work to give you these experiences, and that's how one progresses. It's not about learning more, right? One Blade of Grass, which alludes, of course, to what it would take to carry this knowledge across a river, right? It's the experience we're going for, and I think it's the same with trauma release work. It's not enough to understand how you were traumatized and how you get triggered. It's doing the work, but whether it's the sort of somatic work, or in my case, it's re-presencing those early experiences.
Yes, beautifully put.
Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh man. Well,
Yeah.
thanks again. And we didn't talk, of course. We didn't really talk too much about, the Zen Center, the mountingcloud.org. But we'll make sure we put a link to that, and that's where they can find the classes that you run and so on.
Hey, thanks so much, Richard. Actually, also originallove.org is a separate site, but linked to the Mountain Cloud site. So there's that as well. You might want to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds fascinating. I know I didn't get into it, but that sounds fascinating.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. I'll let you get to your next appointment, but this has been great.
Great to meet you. Thank you.
Great to meet you. Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.